Right, been in the news a lot. This one, the World Health Organisation's new treaties with many countries about being able to call a pandemic. There's a really great victory update from Citizen Go. This is excellent. They helped to stop a lot of this WHO power grab. So it's an attempted power grab that would have handed unelected officials the right to impose lockdowns, to mandate vaccines, medical procedures, and censored dissent worldwide. Now, what we hadn't heard was that shortly before July the 19th, when this came into effect, Citizen Go supporters in over 20 countries helped block the WHO's IHR amendments from being implemented worldwide. This is really exciting. Like I say, people, not just people are rising up, but countries, nations are rising up. So Israel and the USA formally rejected the amendments. This was followed swiftly by Italy. Austria has launched a legal challenge. Slovakia and the Netherlands have had their deadline extended. And this global effort was powered by thousands, including Australians who stood up to be counted and stood up when it was counted. Sadly, in Australia, the government did not reject the amendments. We wouldn't expect anything else, would we? And so now they will say they are obliged to legislate certain things, even though the wording of the legislation doesn't commit them to it. Remember, we looked at Malcolm Roberts' speech last week, and the wording in that legislation does not actually commit them to having to follow. But we know the gutlessness of the leaders. Let's just see what happens. But let's say this, we won't be complying. We will not be complying, and we will not be the only ones. So again, coercion is not consent. Governments don't rule by force, they rule because people comply. And each one of us has made a stand, and the numbers of those people standing are growing, for which we are very thankful. So thank you, everybody.
In May of 2021, the United Nations World Health Organization released a report titled COVID-19, Make It the Last Pandemic. The report called for closer cooperation between nations and more power for the World Health Organization to coordinate and initiate that collaboration. In December 2021, the UN World Health Organization held a special assembly to consider a proposal for a pandemic treaty to give effect to their report. The proposal from the United Nations was a nefarious document. It proposed turning the World Health Organization into the World Health Police, with powers to compel member nations to comply with any directive from the WHO. This could include forced vaccinations, forced medical procedures, lockdowns, border and national closures, business closures, school closures, and the spending of huge sums of money on medical countermeasures. Those provisions were not a conspiracy theory. The proposal actually said in plain English the WHO should have the power to force medical procedures on citizens in member nations. It allowed the Director General of WHO to declare a pandemic at any time, for any reason, meaning the world would forever be under a pandemic order and the WHO would forever be able to order these horrible anti-human measures. Fortunately, the 2021 Special Assembly failed to reach an agreement when a bloc of 42 African nations opposed the proposal. Having been used for decades as a testing ground for disease and vaccine research, coming at a huge cost in African lives, these nations were not signing up for more deaths. The outcome of the World Health Assembly in 2021 was to set in place a 3-year time frame for a pandemic agreement to be developed. A committee of WHO luminaries was set up to review the proposal. These were many of the world's leading health experts who had worked with the WHO for many years. Their wisdom shone through, and they tore the proposed treaty to shreds, stating it would destroy support for the WHO. Their staff did not want to become the World Health Police. They just want to work on improving health in underdeveloped member countries. In the end, that's what prevailed. Multiple new drafts were produced across 3 years and given to a steering committee to test support, and each time failing to get the numbers. A new version followed, which further watered down the compulsion and the destruction of national and personal sovereignty. A final version, a consensus document, was produced and passed at the World Health Assembly in May this year. Gone were 50 pages of nefarious provisions. Nothing that gave the WHO powers of compulsion has survived from the original version. This agreement contains no compulsion on member states. Wherever the wording says a member state shall, it's always followed by a modifier, such as subject to national laws, having mind to national sovereignty, subject to financial resources, and so on. There are no binding provisions in this agreement beyond the need to advise the WHO when a disease outbreak occurs that may be of national or international significance, which is a good idea. After all, China sat on COVID for months in 2019 to give the billionaires time to hold Event 201 and to craft a response that maximised their financial benefit, a response which caused untold suffering and deaths around the world using fraudulent science, mass propaganda and military coercion. A deadly response which was not designed to minimise suffering. Instead, the response was designed to maximise the transfer of wealth from everyday citizens to the world's predatory billionaires. For complete clarity, this document's latest version is not what people are saying it is. There's no loss of Australian sovereignty and no new powers for the World Health Organization. No new powers that can be forced on a member state. Our political party, One Nation, of course opposes the pandemic agreement and the changes to the international health regulations that implement the provisions of the agreement, for the simple reason we do not accept there is a role in the world for these unelected, unaccountable, anti-human bureaucrats. This has always been One Nation policy. In my first Senate speech in 2016, I called for an Oz exit, Australia to exit the UN. And in April 2022, thanks to my diligent and knowledgeable staff team, I was the first Australian politician to oppose the pandemic treaty. Oz exit is necessary because the UN and their agencies, including the WHO, have been hopelessly compromised by the world's parasitic, indeed predatory billionaires. The WHO now gets most of its funding from entities tied to pharmaceutical companies. In return, the WHO mandates those companies medical products. It's classic crony capitalism. Naked wealth transfer from the people. It's theft. By centralising power in the hands of unelected foreign bureaucrats, we've made the buyout of the UN easier. All the people they need to compromise to become the de facto owners of the world are in the one spot, pretending to act on our behalf while actually lining the pockets of their billionaire parasitic benefactors. These people are not the good guys. These people are your prospective owners. Make no mistake, our health authorities and our politicians have signed up to this agenda. In the next pandemic, they will do the same nefarious, destructive, murderous policies again, and this time they will say, the WHO made us do it. Well, the truth is that the WHO is not making anyone do anything. These people are choosing to behave like this because it's good for their power, their egos, and their careers. The UN and its agencies are in darkness and cannot be saved. One Nation calls for a withdrawal from the World Health Organization, from the United Nations, from the World Economic Forum, and from the World Bank. Thank you. I wish you a successful conference.